UFC Fight Night Moraes vs. Sandhagen is happening this Saturday night on Fight Island. Last weekend we had a rather slow 11-fight event. As of right now, we've got 13 fights on this card, but I think we're in for a treat. On the main card, we've got 3 UFC newcomers appearing in each of the first 3 fights. We've got a former heavyweight contender trying to prove that he's still got it, a lightweight contender looking to make waves in the featherweight division, and it's all topped off with a bantamweight fight with real title implications. I'm really looking forward to this one, so let's just jump right in. Here's my predictions for UFC Fight Night Moraes vs. Sandhagen. The first fight on the main card is a featherweight bout between Youssef Zalal and Ilia Topuria. Topuria is making his UFC debut, and it's not going to be easy. Not only is Zalal a tough fight, but he's a long fight too. Well, he's definitely capable of ending your night quickly. But his 2 losses have both gone to decision, so if you're going to beat him, history says you're going to have to beat him for 15 minutes. Zalal is 3-0 in UFC competition, being pretty dominant in 2 of those, and a lot of people have gotten on board. I'm certainly not going to rip him here, but I'm not quite sold yet. He's only 24 though, so there's plenty of time to buy in. Topuria is undefeated so far, and he's made short work of pretty much everybody. So a big question right off the bat is whether or not Topuria can last for 15 minutes while providing his best effort, because we know Zalal can. Both are good at their wrestling and versed in submissions, and they each have a pretty good stand-up game too. I think I'd give Zalal the advantage in wrestling, Topuria the advantage in the submission game, and they're pretty even in the stand-up, but Topuria is going to hit a whole lot harder. This is a short notice fight for Topuria, and I think this is one of those weird times where it actually favors him. He's going to be hungry and have that extra spark, and Zalal has spent a good portion of his time lately training for someone else. Topuria is good everywhere, which allows him to take risks anywhere, and he's proven to be the kind of fighter who isn't afraid to do so. This is definitely a big step up in competition for him, but I think he looks ready. I'm not trying to undersell Youssef Zalal, but I think this is a sneaky bad matchup for him. I'm going to make a fairly bold prediction here and say that the UFC newcomer wins his debut and gives Zalal his first finish loss. I'm calling Ilia Topuria by first round TKO. Next up is a heavyweight bout between Tom Aspinall and Alain Badu. We've seen a lot of heavyweights making their UFC debut lately, and here we have another one in Badu. I've been saying this, but in the wake of DC retiring, the heavyweight division is moving on and turning the page. Most of the big names in the division are old fighters, so the UFC has been signing heavyweights left and right, looking for that new, young, soon-to-be contender. I'm not saying Badu is that guy, but Aspinall just might be. We saw Tom make his UFC just a few months ago, and his arrival was highly anticipated, especially by the English MMA community. The English guys know what Tom's about, training his boxing with Tyson Fury and teaching his own students in jiu-jitsu. They knew he was good, and they're really looking forward to his debut. It came against Jake Collier, who didn't look good at all in that fight. He looked like a bloated corpse in the river. But Tom did look really good for 45 seconds, which was how long that fight was. Tom's arrival in the UFC was planned and anticipated, but Badu's is a little different. I don't know if he was already in talks with the UFC, but it seems more likely that he was booked simply as a replacement. After Tom's KO win over Collier, he respectfully called out Sergey Spivak, and he was going to get it. It's a shame Spivak had to pull out because that would have been a good one. But Spivak did pull out, and Badu is the replacement. And this is a really tough fight for a replacement and a tough one for your UFC debut. Tom is good everywhere. Crisp, accurate, technical boxing with enough pop to do the job. He's got good jiu-jitsu, and he's light enough to be quick and agile. So I started this segment by indicating that Badu is the newest heavyweight signing, but I was really talking about Aspinall. Badu is really a light heavyweight, and he's going to be much smaller than Aspinall. I guess he's jumping at the chance to get a UFC fight and contract, and hey, good for him. You got to do what you got to do. But it's not a good matchup for him. He considers himself a striker with a Muay Thai base, but I've not seen his attacks to be that crisp point A to point B style. Wild and looping would probably be a better description. The light heavyweight division has also opened up recently, so I'm hoping he's going to find some success there, but Saturday's not going to be his night. I'm calling Tom Aspinall by first round KO. Next up is the middleweight bout between Perez and Drickus du Plessis. Now this should be a banger, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to du Plessis making his UFC debut. I have been for a while now. This dude is nasty. He's a very exciting fighter. If you don't know him, just look up some of his fights and enjoy. He's a submission and wrestling guy, but he knows how to bang too. 16 fights into his career, and he hasn't heard the final bell yet. And only 2 of those have been losses. So win or lose, he's one of these must-watch kind of guys. Yes, he's new to the UFC, but he's a KSW champion, which speaks highly of him. And he's fought some pretty tough dudes otherwise too. This is not your average UFC debutant. There's a lot of videos on YouTube about the top non-UFC fighters, and you would find Drickus du Plessis on most of them. At only 26 years old and already with plenty of solid experience, I look for him to make a name for himself here soon and enjoy a prominent career. Across the octagon, he's matched up with Perez, who's already got 5 UFC fights under his belt. He's had mixed success so far, going 2-3 in the UFC, but those were his only 3 losses on a 15-fight resume, and he's got some good wins on there too. Like du Plessis, Perez is also a banger who knows how to choke you out. The biggest hole in his game, though, has been his endurance and may well end up being his downfall in this one. He's a fast starter, usually opening up with haymakers. Du Plessis is also a fast starter, so expect fireworks early. Make sure you're on your couch with a fresh brew when the opening bell dings. I don't see this one going the distance. My money says it's going to be a short fight, but if it does last, it's a good bet it'll be fight of the night. Not to undersell Perez, he's a tough fight for sure, but I'm seeing this as a bit of a setup fight for du Plessis. Give him a guy that complements his talents, give him a chance to look good and leave an impression on the viewers, and the sky's the limit. There's a lot of great, mouth-watering matchups for him in this division, but he's got to get past Perez first, and I think he will. I'm calling Drickus du Plessis by first round KO. Next up is another heavyweight bout between Ben Rothwell and Marcin Tybura. At least it's not the co-main, right? Last week we had unranked heavyweights Yorgan de Castro and Carlos Felipe disappointing us in the co-main event. Should I call it disappointment? I mean, we all expected it to suck, didn't we? And this week we have Big Ben versus Tybura. To be fair, Ben Rothwell has had his day. With 50 professional fights and 28 KO stoppages, the dude's been a big player for many years. Just not this year, or last year, or the year before that. Still, Ben knows what he's doing, but he's got a lot of miles on that big body. He'll be a competent fighter until his final day, but that day is approaching. Marcin is only 4 years younger, but he has half the fights and exactly half the wins and losses. But he's no up-and-comer. He's been at it a while too, making his UFC debut back in 2016, which was 11 fights ago. Interestingly, Marcin made his UFC debut on the card that was headlined by Junior Dos Santos and Ben Rothwell. More interestingly, that was the night that marked the end of Rothwell's relevancy. I said all that just to say I'm not expecting a whole heap of a lot of entertainment out of these two. I figure we could find better suited opponents for each of them, but whatever. This will likely turn into a long clinch battle against the fence with the 2 big men wrestling for position while throwing 2 and 3 inch punches. I don't know who's better in that position. I'm sure they'll just cancel each other out as far as the scorecards are concerned. But in those moments in between, I do think Rothwell has the advantages. He's a volume striker, and the judges always like that. He's got decent power in those hands, probably more than Tybura, and his submission game is actually pretty good. I don't see Tybura winning this one unless Rothwell has indeed hit that point where he simply can't do it any longer. I think that point is coming, but he's got a little left. I think this is going to be a long, boring fight. I often find myself rooting for my predictions because I like to feel smart, but this time I'll be happy if I'm wrong. I'm calling Ben Rothwell by a boring, unanimous decision. Next up is a featherweight bout between ranked 14 contender Edson Barboza and Makwan Americani. Full disclosure here, I'm a huge Barboza fan, and you probably are too, especially if you prefer dynamic strikers. I know there's a lot of dudes out there whose combat sports experience is college or high school wrestling, and you prefer the Cormiers or Khabibs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I like stand-up strikers and submission specialists. I'll take an Anderson Silva, Jose Aldo, or an Adesanya all day long. Barboza is definitely one of my guys. I love watching this dude fight even though he's been on a pretty lengthy slide. He's gone 1-5 lately, yikes. But it's really not all that bad. 2 of those fights could have easily gone his way. A lot of people, myself included, thought he won the Paul Felder and Dan Ige fights. Well, I thought he won the Paul Felder fight. He definitely won that Ige fight. How do you drop a guy? So with Khabib and Gaethje also handing Edson a pair of L's in there, that 1-5 stint really isn't as bad as it looks. And here's a good chance for him to get back on track. Barboza is, of course, one of the most dynamic strikers you can find, and the Americani is going to have to figure out a way through those strikes in order to be successful. Barboza is at such a high level that it's not as if Americani could have just caught up with him during this training camp. Plus, Makwan's taken this fight on rather short notice, so he hasn't been training specifically for Barboza for very long. He's going to try to wrap Barboza up and pull him to the ground, try to land some sort of submission once he's there. But Barboza's very explosive off his back too. He's just one of the most athletic guys in the UFC. His scrambles, quickness, and side-to-side movement are going to make him hard to take down. And his explosiveness and submission prowess will make him hard to submit. I mean, he is Brazilian after all. You don't come up in the fight game in Brazil without getting a pretty hefty knowledge of BJJ. As mentioned, his striking is next level. His speed is phenomenal. He's gonna look like somebody used a cheat code here with how much faster he is. I like Makwan Americani too. I think he can beat most people in the featherweight division. I just don't think Barboza's one of them. Over the past couple of years, Shane Burgos finished him with body shots. Jason Knight dropped him a time or two. And Barboza is decades ahead of both those guys. I could just keep building Edson up. Like I said, I'm a huge fan, but you get the point. So let's just wrap up this segment. I'm calling Edson Barboza by 3rd round TKO. The main event is a bantamweight fight between number 1 contender Marlon Moraes and number 4 Corey Sandhagen. This is a great fight with top bantamweight honors, and the rankings are actually pretty accurate in this one. If Marlon wins, he'll keep his number 1. If Sandhagen wins, well, he can't leapfrog Aljamain Sterling, right? But he'll climb a place or 2 or 3. Here's a fight that may determine the next title challenger, but it shouldn't. Why has Aljamain not gotten the fight booked yet? I did a video a while back that I called Why No Love for Aljo. Check it out after this video. But I thought for sure he'd have that title fight scheduled by now. I'm truly worried that if Marlon wins this weekend, he's going to get the next shot. And with a win over Sterling, although it was like 3 years ago, he is a pretty rightful heir to the throne. But I'm also really worried that if Sandhagen wins, he'll get the next shot, which would solidify all our suspicions that the UFC simply doesn't like Aljo. Then Bellator would recognize this and pay Aljamain a lot of money, and we'd never see him in his Reeboks again. So check out that video and join me in saying give Aljo a title shot. Even with all that going on, I'm still super excited about this main event. I like Corey Sandhagen, and I really like Marlon Moraes. I agree with the MMA community that Moraes kind of quit in that Cejudo fight, and it's hard to let him live that down. But he's gone the distance with some very good guys like a Sunsao when he was one of the best in the world, or Miguel Torres when he was in his prime. I think it was less of a reflection on Moraes' mentality and more of a reflection of the champion that Henry Cejudo is. But this is a completely different fight. Sandhagen is a great fighter who proves his grit and toughness nearly every time out. Seems like he gets popped pretty early every time and has to recover and come back. And right there is the problem. Sandhagen cannot afford to get popped by Marlon Moraes. If he does, it'll either be a standing KO, a ground and pound kill, or Marlon will just take us back. That's kind of what Sterling did, and Marlon has more of a killer instinct than Aljo does. I like Corey Sandhagen, but I think he's going to have a real difficult time with fighters who hit hard and often. We've already seen Aljamain take him out, and I think he loses to the other 3 fighters ranked above him too. The champ Peter Yan, Cody Garbrandt, and Moraes are those 3 other fighters, and they're just too vicious with blood in the water. Corey needs to either tighten up his stand-up game or just grab his hat and uniform because he's going to be needed at the gate. I'm going to make a series of predictions here. Marlon Moraes wins. Corey Sandhagen becomes the bantamweight gatekeeper. Marlon Moraes gets the next title shot. Aljamain Sterling leaves the UFC. Dana White claims he and Aljo were never friends. I'm calling Marlon Moraes by first round KO. So there's my predictions for UFC Fight Night, Moraes versus Sandhagen. It's going to be a great night, and there's some pretty exciting undercard fights too, so make sure you tune in early. Afterward, we'll do a complete recap of the events and those fighters who really shined in the next episode of The Real Winners and Losers, which will be available Monday afternoon like usual. So check back in for that video and let me know who you think were the biggest winners and losers of the event. And check out that Aljamain Sterling video I was talking about too. It should be popping up on your screen soon enough. Click that subscribe button to be notified of each video's release and to give me the warm and fuzzies. I really do appreciate the views and subscriptions, so keep them coming and I'll keep providing the videos. Till next time.